Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the IISc MSR seminar series. Today we have with us Dr. Sayan Bhattacharya, who is an associate professor at the University of Warwick. He did his PhD from Duke University. Then he held postdoctoral positions at Max Planck Institute for Informatics, Germany, and University of Vienna, Austria. His research mainly focuses on dynamic algorithms and graph algorithms, and he has multiple publications in top-tier conferences such as StockFox Soda in these areas over the past few years. Today he will be talking about some recent advances in dynamic algorithms for maximum matching and minimum set cover. This talk will be split into two parts. The first part will be presented today and the second part is scheduled same time next week. That is on December 10th, 4 to 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So please make sure you join that too. And with this, I'll hand it over to Professor Sayan.
Thanks a lot for the kind introduction and many thanks for the invitation. So I'm going to talk about dynamic algorithms for matching and set cover. And throughout the talk, I would suggest that if you have any question, feel free to interrupt me and just ask this question. So the thing is, I can't see the chat. So if you just type something in chat, I won't be able to see it while I'm giving the talk. But please feel free to interrupt. Okay. So let's start. And I will start by giving a very gentle introduction to the area of dynamic algorithms. So take your favorite computational problem and consider any algorithm for it. And suppose on a given input I, the algorithm produces output O. And now suppose the input changes slightly by means of an update. And we want to know the new output of the algorithm on this new input. How do you go about solving this problem? There is a trivial answer. The trivial answer is just recompute this output from scratch, just by running the same algorithm from scratch on this new input. But can we do something better? And by doing better, I mean, we already know the output O corresponding to the input I. Using this information, can we somehow speed up the time the algorithm takes to produces the new output after a slight change in its current input? And this question can be asked in the context of any optimization problem. So basically, can we efficiently maintain the solution to an optimization problem as the underlying input changes over time? And this is the question that is at the heart of dynamic algorithms. Okay, so in this talk, I will be focusing on dynamic matching and along with dynamic vertex and set covers, which are very related to dynamic matching. So let me start by precisely defining the problem of dynamic matching. So we have an input graph with n nodes and m edges. And as we know, a matching M is just a set of edges that do not share any common endpoints. So this set of red edges form a matching. Now, at pre-processing, we are given an empty graph G with an empty edge set, with n nodes and an empty edge set. And this dynamic matching algorithm, you can think of it as a black box, which maintains a matching in the current input in some output memory. And now this algorithm can handle a sequence of updates where each update inserts or deletes an edge in the input graph. And after each update, the dynamic algorithm does some internal computation and after that makes some changes in its output memory so that M remains a valid matching in the current input graph. And the time taken by the algorithm to handle an update is called its update time. And we wish to design an algorithm with small approximation ratio that maintains a near optimal matching and with as small amortized update times as possible. So throughout this talk, when I use the phrase amortized update time, I will just mean this. If I say amortized update time is log n, it just means that the algorithm takes t times log n total time to handle t updates starting from an empty graph. So on average, it takes log n time to handle an update. Okay, And our ultimate goal is to design a dynamic matching algorithm with polylog amortized update time and small approximation ratio. And why polylog? It's because basically, if you have a dynamic algorithm with polylog update time, then you can use it to design a static algorithm that runs in near linear total time. So just to solve the static problem, just start with an empty graph and manually feed each of these edges one at a time to your dynamic algorithm. The dynamic algorithm will handle them as updates. And at the end of inserting all these edges, the dynamic algorithm will be able to produce an output. So basically, when we have polylog update time, we are almost matching the corresponding running time in the static setting. Okay, and throughout this talk, I will use this notation big O tilde of 1 to hide polylog factors. Now, the dynamic matching problem can then be summarized as follows: maintained in polylog update time and approximately maximum matching in a dynamic graph. The dynamic vertex cover problem is defined analogously. So recall that a vertex cover is just a set of nodes which has
quick question. Yeah, so I guess you are requiring T to be arbitrary, but for smaller T is like so the point that you're making is that okay, if T were M itself or large enough, then this so what I'm asking is like somehow there's an implicit like point here that log n or something is necessary because T can be large enough for you to go from an empty graph to an arbitrary one. So, but like, does it matter? Okay,
so there are
specifically like for small t. Let's say I tell you that t itself is going to be polylog. So, are there better bounds or am I jumping to ahead?
Okay, so let me just say two things. So first of all, log amortized update time is not always required. Actually, for some problems, you can even get constant amortized update time. The second, and the second thing is that you can define amortized update time in two different ways. In the definition I am using, I'm just starting with an empty graph. This is crucial. And alternatively, you can define amortized update time where at pre-processing, you start with a non-empty graph and then you look at any sequence of T updates. But then you imagine that the size of the input graph at pre-processing, let's say that's T prime, then when you are measuring amortized update time, it will be with respect to T prime plus T.
Okay. So you don't count away the pre-processing time. You don't count it as your expense.
Yeah, so basically, if the size at pre-processing is T prime, if it has T prime edges at pre-processing, then that definition will say that the sum total of my pre-processing time plus total update time should be at most T prime plus T times log n. That's when I will say that it has amortized update time log n.
And by amortize, you just mean across the average across these T update order.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So next, let us just define the dynamic vertex cover problem. The model remains exactly the same as before, just the definition of the problem is different. So as we know, a vertex cover is just a set of nodes which has the following property. Every edge in the graph must have at least one endpoint in the vertex cover. And in the dynamic vertex cover problem, we are asked to maintain in polylogarithmic update time an approximately minimum vertex cover in a dynamic graph G under edge insertions or deletions. Okay. And matchings and vertex covers are duals of each other if you just look at the corresponding LP relaxations. That's why we are talking about these two problems at the same breath. The third problem that we will be concerned with is dynamic set cover. Let me again precisely define this. We have a universe U of elements and M sets defined over the universe. At pre-processing, assume that the universe is empty. The sets are given, so of course the sets are also empty. And now the updates are insert or delete an element in this universe and along with specify the sets that contain that element. That's an update. And let n denote the number of elements in the universe and let f denotes the maximum frequency of an element, where the frequency of an element is just the number of sets which contain that element. And since we are in the dynamic setting, let n and f denote an upper bound on the maximum number of elements and the maximum frequency of an element across all updates. And what we are trying to do here is to maintain an approximately minimum set cover in order f polylog n amortized update time. And note that here in this update time bound, intuitively, this term f should appear because even to just specify an update, you might need omega f time. Because when an element E arrives, you need to specify which sets contain it, and there might be f sets containing it. So of course, you have to pay an order f term in the update time. Okay. And why is this related to the previous problems? Because when f equal to 2, this is precisely the dynamic vertex cover problem. Because the elements are arriving and departing and the elements correspond to edges, the sets correspond to nodes. An element belongs to a set if and only if the edge is adjacent to the corresponding node. Okay, so these are the three problems that we will be concerned with. And once the problem definition is over, let me just quickly look at the state of the art in dynamic algorithms for these three problems. The first thing to note is that there is probably over 20 different papers now on dynamic matching and vertex cover that appeared in the last 10 or so years. So of course, I won't have time to outline the results in each of these papers, but let me try to just point out why there are so many different results on this question. That's because there are many different parameters here that you might wish to optimize. One is worst case update time versus amortized update time, which one you want. The second one is how good an approximation ratio you want. The third parameter would be, let's say, are you happy with bipartite graphs or general graphs? The fourth parameter would be, are you looking at fully dynamic setting that accounts for both edge insertions and deletions? Or are you looking at partially dynamic settings, which either only accounts for edge insertions or only accounts for edge deletions? So there are these 4 or 5 different parameters, and if you just fix each of these parameters, you get a different question. And for that specific question, you might wish to get the best possible bound that you want. And that's why there are so many different results on this question.
One question.
And yes.
One question. So dynamic algorithms and online algorithms with recourse, how do you compare these two areas? So if you have online algorithm, but you can change your solution with recourse, does these results already imply some bounds there as well?
Yeah, so this is a black box statement. If you have a dynamic algorithm for an optimization problem that explicitly maintains the solution in an output memory, then you also have a low recourse algorithm for the same optimization problem. So the update time of the dynamic algorithm is an upper bound on the recourse that you will get. So dynamic algorithms are strictly stronger objects in that regard. However, for say dynamic matching, the recourse version of the problem is trivial because you can get 1 plus epsilon approximate matching with order 1 over epsilon recourse, because you just need to prevent large augmenting paths and the recourse will be small. If you are just preventing augmenting paths of length greater than 1 over epsilon, your recourse will be 1 over epsilon. But the challenge is, how do you detect those augmenting paths?
I see. Thanks.
Yeah, does this answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So there is, yeah.
One quick. So you keep referring to this thing as like the output memory. So why is this like an important construct to have in mind? Like, what distinguishes it from like the standard like working memory of the algorithm? Is there a distinction to be made?
Actually, there is a technical distinction, but for simplicity in the beginning of the talk, I didn't want to get into that detail. So the technical distinction is this. Hypothetically, you can think of another dynamic matching algorithm, which does not basically, which maybe maintains, let's say, 1,000 different solutions simultaneously. And it only has the guarantee that at any point in time, one of these solutions will be valid, and it can just point to that solution very quickly. So what can such a dynamic algorithm do? It can it can answer a query regarding the size of the solution very quickly. And if you are just asking for a matching, it can return the matching in time proportional to the size of the matching. However, its recourse will be large. Why? Because it's maintaining 1,000 different solutions and just switching between one or from one to the other very quickly after updates.
Oh, okay. So I guess what you're saying is I can like list out all possible augmentations, like a giant tree with all possible addition deletions, and just see like just pre-compute a database of solutions. So that's not kosher. So that
No, even that version is not trivial. Even that version is not trivial. What I'm saying is that you can define that. Let me just go back to the previous slide. You can define the dynamic matching problem in a different manner, where instead of the dynamic matching algorithm explicitly maintaining one matching in some designated region of the memory, it can answer some queries. And the queries are, give me the size of the matching. It answers that in constant time. And the query might be, return me that matching. And it returns that matching in time proportional to the size of the matching. But it's, yeah, but if you have such a dynamic algorithm, then you cannot say that anything about the recourse of that algorithm.
Okay, got it.
But according to this definition, if you have a dynamic algorithm, it answers Arindam's previous question that it actually upper bounds the recourse.
Okay, makes sense. Yes. Again,
Okay.
this is the strongest of the model in terms of the model. It's the strongest of the three.
Yes, yes. And now, of course, you can ask the question that which of the existing results in the literature work in the strongest model, which does not. But I thought that it will make things unnecessarily complicated at the beginning. So I'm just sticking with this model for now.
Sure, makes sense.
Okay, good. So now there's this long line of work on dynamic matching and vertex cover. And similarly, there is a long line of work on dynamic set cover in recent years. And I'm just listing out some of the relevant papers. But of course, I won't have time to discuss each of these papers individually. Instead, let me do the following. I will just summarize the state of the art in terms of the big open questions in this topic. Really big open questions, the ultimate open questions in this topic. So recall that the goal is we wish to get the approximation ratio that we get in the static setting in polylogarithmic update time, unless there is a lower bound which tells us otherwise. That's the goal. So for dynamic matching, the end goal would be to get 1 plus epsilon approximation in polylog update time. And this is a big open question. And arguably, I would probably say that this is one of the biggest open questions in dynamic algorithms at the present moment. We don't know how to resolve this. For dynamic vertex cover, the end goal would be to get 2 approximation in polylog update time, because even in the static setting under UGC, you cannot get better than 2 approximation. So what do we know about this? We actually know how to get 2 approximation using a randomized algorithm that works against an oblivious adversary, and a 2 plus epsilon approximation deterministically. But a big open question is, can you get 2 approximation deterministically? Can you get rid of this epsilon and still remain deterministic? And finally, for dynamic set cover, in the static setting, there are 2 separate algorithms. One gives you F approximation. So can you match that guarantee in F polylog n update time. That's the first goal. And the second one is greedy algorithm that gives you log n approximation. Can you match that guarantee in F polylog update time? That's the second goal. So for the first goal, we know how to get 1 plus epsilon F approximation deterministically. And again, we know how to get F approximation using randomized algorithms, but we don't know how to get F approximation deterministically. And for the second goal, this is solved. So the paper by Gupta et al. Already gives order log n approximation in F polylog n update time. So this is the state of the art. Now, in the rest of the talk, what I will do is I will give an overview of my own research in this area. And in particular, I will highlight two techniques. One is primal dual algorithms for dynamic fractional matching and vertex cover, which also gives us algorithms for set cover. And the second technique would be dynamic rounding of a fractional matching into an integral matching. So the first one will be the topic of this talk. The second one will be discussed in the second talk. And as end results, we will obtain the following. A 2 plus epsilon approximation for dynamic matching in polylog update time, a 2 plus epsilon approximation for dynamic vertex cover in constant update time, and a 1 plus epsilon times F approximation for dynamic set cover in F polylog update time. So for dynamic vertex cover and set cover, if you are happy with this extra 1 plus epsilon factor, it almost completely resolves the problem. But for dynamic matching, we only get 2 plus epsilon, and how to get better than 2? It's a big open question. And one other thing is all the algorithms in this talk that I will discuss will be deterministic. Okay.
And one
so
question.
Now is, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, in this area, how do you show some lower bound? Like all the results you're mentioning is like algorithmic upper bound, but is there a way to show lower bounds as well, which is non-trivial, or like is it information
Yes.
theory based or?
Right. So there are two separate techniques for showing lower bounds. One is based on information theory. These are called cell probe lower bounds in the cell probe model of computation. But typically you won't get super polylog lower bound in the cell probe model. It's a very big open question in that area. So if you wish polynomial lower bound, which say something like n to the power epsilon on the update time, the only known technique is conditional lower bound. So you start with a conjecture like say ACTH, and then you give a reduction from ACTH to, let's say, an instance of a dynamic problem.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now this actually concludes the first part of the talk.
The matching also holds for weighted matching, or it's just it's the cardinality size version that you're.
Good. So currently there is one framework which can transform any algorithm you have for the cardinality version into an algorithm for weighted matching. However, it will incur an extra 1 plus epsilon factor loss in the approximation guarantee for that transformation. And the update time will be exponential in 1 over epsilon if you apply that transformation.
Okay.
So that's another important open question, that can you do this transformation where the loss in the update time is polynomial in 1 over epsilon?
And this 2 plus epsilon is for matching is for general graphs. So for bipartite,
yeah,
is it something better like the one?
So for bipartite graphs, in the partially dynamic settings, incremental and decremental, we know how to get 1 plus epsilon approximation.
Okay, so there the holy grail has been achieved.
No, not for the fully dynamic setting.
Oh, okay.
I said for partially dynamics. If you only care about age insertions or age deletions, then for bipartite graphs, we know how to get 1 plus epsilon. But not even, yeah.
Okay, and not for this general setting of both removal and additions.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and B, like on this the same thread, like B matchings and other generalizations are, I would imagine, still.
Uh, I would say that if something works for matching, typically it would also work for B matching.
Right.
Although I need to carefully check and each of these algorithms to just confirm whether which one of them immediately extends to B matching or not. So for instance, the algorithm that I am going to present, I'm pretty sure that it will extend to B matching. I mean, quite easily.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good. So this actually concludes one part of the talk where we have defined the problem, we have given the state of the art, and I have outlined the rest of the talk. So now I will just start with the preliminaries. Let's just quickly go through the definition of a fractional matching. We will need this. So a fractional matching basically is just this. You assign a weight to every edge in the graph such that if you look at any node V and then check what is the total weight it receives from all its incident edges, this is going to be at most 1. And now you can see that if these weights were integral 0 or 1, then they would precisely define an integral matching, which we have defined before. And throughout the talk, I will use the phrase size of the fractional matching to just denote the total weight of all the edges in this fractional matching. So here is an example. Let's say this is a triangle graph with 3 nodes. If you assign a weight of half to every edge, this will give you a valid fractional matching. Because look at any node, let's say P, the total weight it receives from its incident edges is at most 1. And the size of this fractional matching is 3/2. Okay, so now you can write the maximum fractional matching problem as an LP relaxation. You can take its dual. That will just give you the minimum fractional vertex cover problem. So the two optimal objective values would be exactly the same. And this is also very well known, almost like a folklore result, that if you look at M star to be the size of the maximum integral matching and V star to be the size of the minimum integral vertex cover, in a general graph, they are a factor 2 away from each other. So basically the size of V star will be at most 2 times the size of M star. We will use this pattern. Okay, so now let's start with a warm up. Suppose we are just given this dynamic matching problem as a homework exercise and we are just asked to come up with some naive algorithm for it in 5 minutes. What will we come up with? The naive algorithm will just maintain a maximal matching in G. And what is a maximal matching? It just has the property that if a node is unmatched, then all its neighbors are matched. Or in other words, it's just the output of the greedy algorithm. You scan through the edges in any arbitrary order and keep including edges as much as you can. That's the greedy algorithm. Its output is a maximal matching. And it's known that this gives to approximation to maximum matching. And now suppose we want to maintain this maximal matching and let Vm denote the set of nodes matched by M. Then this set of nodes matched by M will also form a 2 approximate minimum vertex cover. This also follows from the duality between matching and vertex cover. Okay, so now suppose we want to maintain this. Suppose we are maintaining a maximal matching and now an edge arrives. An edge is inserted. How we handle this insertion? It's easy. If both the 2 endpoints are unmatched, then you just include this edge UV into your matching and then that's it. Nothing else to do. This takes constant time. On the other hand, suppose an edge UV gets deleted. How do you handle this deletion? First of all, if this deleted edge was not part of your previous maximal matching, we don't need to do anything. So we do something only when this edge was part of the previous matching. Then we visit both endpoints. And for its endpoint U, we just find whether it has any free neighbor U prime that is currently unmatched. If yes, then we just match U to U prime and add that to our matching. And we do the same thing for V. And it's easy to check that at the end of this procedure, you will end up with another maximal matching. Now the question is, how much time does this procedure take? Deletion of an edge. This takes time proportional to the degrees of the two nodes, degree of U and degree of V, because you need to check whether U has a free neighbor or whether V has a free neighbor. And these degrees can be as large as order n. So this gives us a naive to approximate algorithm with order n update time, and it's also deterministic. Okay. Now here is a very intriguing open question. Can you get a deterministic maximal matching algorithm with little of an update time? Can you just beat this naive algorithm while being deterministic? I don't know the answer to this question, and it quite frustrates me that we don't know the answer to this question. On the other hand, if you allow for randomization against oblivious adversary, we know how to get to approximation in constant amortized update time. So there is an exponential gap between the best possible randomized algorithm and deterministic algorithm here, where the deterministic algorithm is almost trivial and we don't know how to beat it. Okay. So this is the naive algorithm. What we will do is, instead of maintaining an integral matching, we will maintain a fractional matching. And intuitively, let me try to convince you why it makes sense to maintain a fractional matching. So just look at this same instance, a node V, okay, that has very high degree. So whenever we are searching for free neighbors of V, we are spending time proportional to degree of V. So if we are maintaining fractional matching, what we can do is we can initially assign a weight of 1 over n to every edge in V. And if we do this, then the weight of V will be very close to 1. And after that, we will just wait until the next n over 2 edge deletions incident on V, because this reduces the weight of V by only a constant amount. Maybe the weight of V drops from 1 to half. So we are not losing too much in our objective value. And after this, we will revisit the edges incident on V and reassign the weights on them in some appropriate manner. This reassignment might take theta of n time because V still has large degree, but we can now amortize because we sat idle for the previous n over 2 edge deletions. And after that, we are doing some expensive operation that takes theta n time. So our amortized update time should only be constant. So this is the high level idea. Of course, the actual algorithm is going to be more complicated than that. But now we are ready to start with our first primal dual algorithm for dynamic matching. But for the next several minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, I will just discuss one static primal dual algorithm in the static setting where no updates are taking place. And later on, we will see how to make this thing dynamic. So the algorithm is almost a textbook algorithm. It works as follows. You start by assigning a weight of 0 to all edge. And then you repeat this operation. You keep increasing the edge weights continuously at the same rate until some node gets tight. And by tight, I mean that its weight it receives from its incident edges is 1. And hence we cannot raise the weights of its incident edges any further. At that point, you freeze the edges incident on the tight nodes. So these edges will not increase their weights any further in the next iteration. And you repeat. You go to the next iteration, keep increasing the weights of the unfrozen edges. And ultimately, what will happen is all the edges will get frozen. And at that point, you return the edge weights as your fractional matching and the set of tight nodes as your vertex cover, and they will both form two approximation. And here is an illustration how the algorithm works on this graph. You start by assigning weights 0 to all the edges, keep increasing them uniformly at the same rate until some node gets tight. So this will happen when all the edge weights are 1/3 and this node Z gets tight because its weight is 1. You freeze the weights of the edges incident on Z, so they will not increase any further. In the next iteration, identify the unfrozen edges, which is just xy. Keep increasing its weight until you reach the level 2/3, at which point the endpoint y gets tight. Freeze all the edges incident on y. So the edge xy gets frozen, and now all the edges are frozen. So you return these edge weights and y and z as your tight nodes. Okay. And using a simple primal dual analysis, you can show that this gives you two approximation. Now, what we will do is we will just discretize this static algorithm. So instead of raising the edge weights continuously, we will just raise them in powers of 2. So let capital L denote log n and let GS denote the subgraph induced by a node set S. With these notations in hand, we will do the following. Start with all the nodes and all the edges and assign a weight of 1 over n to every edge. At this point, what is the weight of a node V, denoted by capital W of V? This is between 0 and 1. Why? Because each node V has at most n incident edges. Each of these incident edges have weight 1 over n. So the total weight received by node V is at most 1. Now, you partition this set V into two parts, SL and TL. SL will denote those nodes that are approximately tight, whose weights are between half and 1. And TL will denote those nodes whose weights are not tight, whose weights are small. They are between 0 and half. Now you identify the edges induced by the nodes TL, which got pushed down. These are these red edges, and you double the weights of these red edges. So when you double the weights of these red edges, what will happen? Note that the weights of weights of the nodes in SL, they are not getting impacted at all. But when you are doubling the weights of the red edges, the weights of the nodes in TL might at most double. So the weights of the nodes in TL might be between 0 and 1 right now after this doubling step. And you get back to this situation and then you just repeat. So now again partition WV, the set TL into two parts, SL minus 1 and TL minus 1. So SL minus 1 are the tight nodes whose weights are between half and 1. TL minus 1 gets pushed down by 1 level. These are the nodes with weights between 0 and half. Identify these red edges whose both weight endpoints have small weight in TL minus 1. Double their weights and continue. And you continue like this until we reach level 0. And when we reach level 0, we will have a picture like this. We have basically partitioned this initial node set V into these sets S log n minus 1 dot 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 until S0, and then there is T0. We know that all the nodes in sets S0, S1 dot 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 S log n, their weights are between half and 1. And we know that all the nodes in T0, their weights are between 0 and half. Furthermore, if you look at an edge between two nodes, one at level I, the other one at level j, and I is greater than j, then the weight of this edge is just going to be 1 over 2 to the power I. Why? Because initially the weight of this edge E was 1 over n, which was 1 over 2 to the power log n. And then subsequently in each iteration, both the endpoints of these two edges got pushed down by 1 level until it reached level I, at which point one endpoint of this node became approximately tight and this edge became frozen at that level. So after iteration I, the weight of the edge highlighted here is not going to increase at all. And the weight of this edge at iteration I would be 1 over 2 to the power I, because it kept doubling from 1 over 2 to the power log n. And now what can we say about an edge whose both endpoints are in T0? Well, since the weight of this edge kept doubling, we can say that the weight of this edge is 1 over 2 to the power 0 in this picture, because it started with 1 over 2 to the power log n, and subsequently the weight of this edge kept doubling. But 1 over 2 to the power 0 is just 1. But we have already observed that the weights of its endpoints lie between 0 and half. So this cannot be the case. Hence, there cannot be any red edge between two nodes in T0. So we conclude that there is no edge between two nodes in T0. And in other words, this just means, okay, before proceeding any further, just for simplicity of notation, I'm just going to rename T0 as S minus 1, as I'm doing here. And we have observed that there is no edge between two nodes in S minus 1. In other words, this just means that the nodes in S0 or above, they form a vertex cover. So the nodes in level 0 or above, they form a vertex cover. Each edge has at least one endpoint in them. And the edge weights, which we obtain here, they do form a fractional matching because the weight of every node is between 0 and 1 in this picture. And now the claim is that the size of this vertex cover is at most 4 times the size of this fractional matching. And the proof is just a few lines of argument, but let me just give you the intuition behind the proof. Recall the argument which says that if I take a maximal matching and the set of its matched endpoints, this gives me a 2 approximate vertex cover. What is going on here is we have an approximately maximal fractional matching. So we don't have an integral matching, it's fractional, and it's approximately maximal. Why? Because if you look at any edge, at least one of its endpoints lies in level 0 or above. So at least one of its endpoints have weight between half and 1. So we have an approximately maximal fractional matching, and we are just collecting the set of its approximately tight endpoints. So both this fractional matching and this vertex cover that we get out of it should be a good approximation. So instead of being 2 approximation, it's 4 approximation, just because we are just doubling these weights in power of 2. That's it. That's the main idea. And now the proof is just this. Let S denote the set of nodes at levels greater than or equal to 0. So the size of S can be written like this. And now note that every node in S has weight WV at least half. So we have this inequality. And now we just write it like this. And finally, we just express these weights of the nodes as the weights of the edges, using the fact that basically every edge will have one endpoint in S. And each edge gets counted at most twice. So we get this inequality. And this is just 4 times the size of the fractional matching. So, and then we have a valid vertex cover, which is at most 4 times the size of the matching. So our matching is 4 approximate and the vertex cover is 4 approximate. Now, the proof is via LP duality. And finally, instead of discretizing these edge weights in powers of 2, if we just discretize these edge weights in powers of 1 plus epsilon, it will just lead to 2 plus epsilon approximation. Okay. And now we need to discuss how to make this algorithm dynamic. This is just a static algorithm that gives 2 plus epsilon approximate maximum fractional matching. Our goal is now to make this thing dynamic. Okay, so any questions so far?
Yeah, like the typical way that you sort of execute, like in a discrete fashion, the continuous primal dual thing is you look at the minimal, like you go to every vertex, look at the minimum gap and increase the edge weights. So look at the closest to being tight and you increase that. So that is like from this idea of continuously increasing weights, that's how you translate it into a. So that is, you're intentionally avoiding that with this powers of 2.
Yeah, good point. Actually, good point. When we make it dynamic, we will crucially use the fact that we are increasing the edge weights in this manner.
Okay. So for one, this will give you that the edge weights are always like so they're only log n buckets of edge weights. I guess that's one.
Right. And another way to look at it is this. This will ensure that the edge weights are kept as small as possible. For the following reason, because a dynamic algorithm requires stability. Stability in the sense that if an update comes, my objective should not degrade by too much. Now, stability is achieved when the fractional weights you are putting on the edges are as small as possible. And so, for instance, if you have a near regular graph, every node has a degree roughly equal to d. Right. Then this algorithm will basically assign a weight of 1 over d to every edge.
Okay. But even the continuous one would do that, right?
Oh, yeah, even the continuous one will do that. What I was trying to say is that if you now go through the nodes in sequence, and for each node, then you try to increase the edge weights, the weights of the edges incident on it, I'm not sure you will get the same thing. Will you?
Okay. Yeah, I see. Yes. I mean, the order might lead you to bad solution. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now we go to the next part of the talk where we have this static algorithm and we will just show how to maintain this thing dynamically. And there will be actually two different approaches. One approach is just this. Let's say that a node V is clean if its weight WV lies within this prescribed range and dirty otherwise. And by prescribed range, I mean the range shown in the picture. Okay. And initially, the graph is empty. Every node is at level -1 and hence clean. And now suppose every node is clean before an edge insertion or deletion in G. What happens after an edge insertion or deletion? Once an edge gets deleted, basically it takes away its weight from its two endpoints. So its two endpoints weight drops. On the other hand, if an edge gets inserted between level I and j, where I is greater than j, it receives weight 1 over 2 to the power I. So its two endpoints increase their weights by 1 over 2 to the power I. So this might make its two endpoints dirty. How do we fix this? We just fix this using the simplest possible greedy heuristic imaginable. So look at this node X. Its incident edges can be partitioned into two parts. The green edges, whose other endpoints lie below X, and the black edges, whose other endpoints lie above X. And these green edges have the property that the weights of these green edges are determined by the level of X. Because if you just look at the picture on the left-hand side and look at the red edge on the left-hand side, the weight of this red edge is determined by the level of its higher endpoint. So X determines the weights of the green edges, but not the black edges. So while there is a dirty node X, either its weight is too big or too small. If its weight is too big, we will just increment the level of X by 1. What will happen then? The weights of these green edges will decrease because Lx is increasing by 1. And hence the weight of X will decrease. And the weight of the black edges will remain unchanged. On the other hand, if weight of X is too small, we will just decrease its level by 1. It's just the inverse operation. However, this local fix is actually changing the weight of X in the right direction, but it has a cascading effect because the weights of the green edges are changing. That means the weights of the other endpoints of the green edges are changing. So the other endpoints of the green edges can now become dirty. And we need to fix those dirty nodes. And we will do that in future iterations of the same while loop. So we just keep running this while loop until there is no dirty node. Now, it's not even clear that this while loop terminates, that this cascading effect does not lead to a cycle. But if and when this while loop terminates, every node is clean. And what we have is something that precisely corresponds to the output of the static algorithm on the current input. So the correctness of the algorithm is trivial. The pseudocode is just this literally 3 lines. This is the pseudocode for the algorithm. However, what is highly non-trivial is to prove that it converges quickly. And this is what we did in a paper in 2015, where using a very complicated potential function, we showed that this algorithm actually has log n amortized update time. Subsequently, in 2019, we used a much more refined analysis of the same algorithm to conclude that this algorithm actually has constant amortized update time. And both the proofs are via intricate potential functions, and I'll just skip them because of lack of time. But I hope that the main algorithm is very simple to appreciate what it is doing. Okay, so this immediately means that we can maintain a 2 plus epsilon approximate maximum fractional matching and a 2 plus epsilon approximate minimum vertex cover in constant update time. However, for technical reasons, it's difficult to extend this to the set cover problem. So the moment f is greater than 2, our potential function analysis breaks down and you won't get 1 plus epsilon times f approximation anymore in order for the potential function to work. So we need a new approach to solve the dynamic set cover problem. It will be based on the same static algorithm, but the dynamic algorithm will be completely different. So to highlight this new idea, we will now only focus on edge deletions for the remaining, let's say, 5 minutes. That's where the main idea lies. So only edge deletions. Okay. So let me now just try to explain a different approach for maintaining the same hierarchical partition. And to contrast this approach with previous work, this local update rule, what this local update rule was doing was maintaining approximate complementary slackness conditions. That's one way to put it. If you just look at the two LPs for matching and vertex cover, that's what the local update rule was doing. But for f greater than 2, it seems that if you force maintenance of approximate complementary slackness, you cannot just get the potential function to work out. So here is the new approach, just under edge deletions. Take the same static algorithm. And our goal is to maintain the basic algorithm's output approximately under edge deletion. Let G denote the input graph. What we will do is, instead of maintaining the basic algorithm's output on the exact input graph G, we will maintain it on a different graph G star, which we will call the shadow graph, shadow input. And this shadow input has the same node set V, and its edge set is just the edges in the original input union some edges which we will call dead edges. And I will soon define how these dead edges are constructed. And the edges that are present in the original input, I will just call them active edges. So now at pre-processing, D is empty set. There's no dead edge. You just run the static algorithm on the existing input at pre-processing. And subsequently, whenever an edge E gets deleted from the input graph, you just remove that edge E from the set E to capital D. So declare that edge as dead. So dead edges are basically edges which already got deleted in the past, but we are pretending that they still exist in our shadow graph. That's the interpretation of dead edges. And that's it. You don't do anything else. You just keep maintaining the same algorithm's output. So the principle is you just wish to be lazy as long as you can feasibly without hampering the approximation guarantee. But this bliss needs to end at some point. At some point you need to wake up. You cannot go on doing this forever. At what point you will wake up? When the total weights of the dead edges becomes more than epsilon times the total weight of the active edges. And this is the invariant that you will enforce. And informally, this invariant just means that you are forcing the shadow input to remain very close to the actual input. Although you are giving some stability to the dynamic algorithm, because when an edge gets deleted, you are just classifying it as dead edge. So when this invariant gets violated, we will call a subroutine rebuild that will remove some dead edges, recompute the output on the new shadow graph after removing those dead edges. That's the algorithm. And how this rebuild subroutine works, When you are calling this rebuild subroutine, the total weight of the dead edges is already at least epsilon times the total weight of the active edges. Now, from this, using a simple counting argument, you can conclude that there must exist some level in this picture on the left-hand side, some level I, which has the following properties. That the number of dead edges at levels at most I is greater than epsilon times the number of active edges at levels at most I. This is just a simple counting argument, because otherwise it cannot be the case that the dead edges are getting too much weight compared to the active edges. So let's identify such a level I. And now we will just remove all the dead edges that are appearing at levels at most I. So all the dead edges that are appearing within this black box here. And we will just recompute the partition on the new shadow graph after removing these dead edges. That's it. That's the algorithm. Now, how do you bound the update time? For bounding the update time, the crucial observation is this. This is probably the crux of the key insight in the entire paper. That when you are doing this recomputation after removing these few dead edges, you don't need to do the recomputation from scratch. Instead, let di denote the number of dead edges at level at most I that you are removing, and let ai denote the number of active edges at levels at most I. Then the time spent on rebuilding is just proportional to whatever was inside this black box just before to this rebuild. So the time spent is just proportional to ai plus di, and it's not proportional to the size of the current shadow graph, which might be much larger than ai plus di. And why it is the case? It is for the following reason. If you just think back how the static algorithm works, the static algorithm just goes in a top-down manner. So it first constructs level log n, then log n minus 1, and so on until it reaches level I. So if you now delete some dead edges or dead edges, active edges, whatever, if you delete some edges from level I or below and rerun the algorithm from scratch, then whatever was happening in level log n minus 1, they will remain intact because you are removing only edges from level I or below. So the time spent on rebuilding is ai plus di, and we are assuming that di is sufficiently large compared to ai because the number of dead edges at level at most I is at least epsilon times ai. So the time spent on rebuilding is basically di over epsilon. However, we have waited for di edges to get deleted before we reached this juncture. And when those di edges were getting deleted, we didn't do anything. So we can just charge the cost of rebuilding to those di dead edges that got deleted and get 1 over epsilon update time. And edge insertions can be handled with slightly more extra effort, but that's not the key idea. The key idea is illustrated in this slide. Okay. So using this completely different approach, this lazy approach, yeah.
Here you can actually, the I doesn't matter. Like when the violation happens, you can pick any level where, so I guess like figuring out that the violation has happened is easy, but finding this level, is that also proportional to DI?
Yes, so finding that level, you can actually do that in log n worst case time, because whenever an edge gets deleted and gets classified as dead, you just keep, let's say, log n counters, one for each level, which just tracks how many dead edges are there at this level or below. Okay. And once an edge gets deleted, you just update log n counters.
Right. So, I mean, another way of looking at this idea is that if it were the case that the deletion happened in the reverse order of your algorithm, you'd be very happy. Like, so if all the edges were like the first deletions were between S minus 1 and S0, you'd be like a very little amount, like the first log n phases of the algorithm would remain the same. So you just kind of do the last phase.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. If the deletions were in reverse order, then yeah, there is nothing further to be done.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, and this is why it's very crucial that we start with this specific static algorithm which grows the weights in this manner, because otherwise you don't get this property that when you are rebuilding, you can only look at part of the graph and spend time proportional to that part of the graph.
Interesting.
Okay, and you can note that these two separate algorithms, they are both based on the same static algorithm, but they are following different paradigms. One is just this local greedy heuristic, which is actually enforcing approximate complementary slackness conditions for each of these constraints in this pair of primal dual LPs, whereas this lazy approach is not enforcing approximate complementary slackness. And so using this lazy approach, we can maintain 2 plus epsilon approximate fractional matching and 2 plus epsilon approximate minimum vertex cover in log n amortized update time. And what is very nice about this lazy approach is that it just seamlessly extends to the dynamic set cover problem. So the result that I am stating below is the result of that paper. The paper is about dynamic set cover. But if you just understand what I explained in the previous slides for dynamic vertex cover, all you will need is to just change the notations. I mean, change vertex cover to set cover everywhere in the proof, and everything will just go through. So we get this result that we actually get 1 plus epsilon times f approximate minimum set cover in f log n over epsilon squared update time. And in a follow-up work, one thing unsatisfactory about theorem 3 is this log n term that is appearing, because previously for just dynamic vertex cover, we knew how to get constant update time. But here we just get this log n overhead. So in a follow-up work, we actually managed to got rid of this log n overhead and instead got this update time, which is basically 1 plus epsilon times f approximation in f squared over epsilon cubed update time. Now this log n overhead is gone, but now we have f squared. So basically for every constant f, we get constant update time, but it's still open to get an update time that is just order f, so that it exactly matches the running time in the static setting. And this follow-up work is actually highly technical, but at a very high level, what it is doing is it's using a hybrid approach where it's just combining these two previous paradigms that I outlined. So in this follow-up work, when the nodes are moving up, they are moving up levels in this local hierarchy, in this hierarchical partition. They are moving up because of this local update rule, because of this greedy heuristic. On the other hand, when nodes are moving down, they are moving down because of this lazy periodic rebuilding approach. And by combining these two approaches, we managed to get rid of this log factor. Okay, so this is basically the end of this talk. In the next talk, what I will do, so until now, we just discussed dynamic fractional matching algorithms, basically. Two different kinds of dynamic fractional matching algorithms and their implications for dynamic set cover. In the next talk, I will discuss how can we round those dynamic fractional matchings into integral ones, again efficiently in Polylog update time. And let me just again conclude the talk by reminding you of the big open questions in this area. One is, for dynamic set cover, can we just get a clean 1 plus epsilon f approximation in order f time instead of order f squared that we have? The second one, and I find the second one to be very perplexing, this deterministic 2 approximation for dynamic vertex cover in Polylog update time, and equivalently a deterministic dynamic algorithm for maximal matching in Polylog update time. Because we discussed an order n update time algorithm for dynamic maximal matching in the beginning, which was almost trivial. We don't even know how to get better than that. And finally, the very big open question in dynamic algorithms, can we get 1 plus epsilon approximation for dynamic matching in Polylog in update time? Deterministic or randomized, I don't care here. Or can we get a lower bound that rules out this possibility? Or even simpler, can we just get, let's say, 1.9 approximation for dynamic matching in Polylog and update time? So this threshold of 2 at which we are stuck for Polylog update time, it has a natural interpretation that this is maximal matching, basically. So can we get some non-trivial, something non-trivially better than 2? Let's say 1.9 or 1.8, still in polylog update time. Okay, so this concludes the talk. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from anybody?
Hey, Shan, so like, are there better results? Let's say I'm happy with like a relinquishing polylog but still sublinear. So linear is
Okay, sure. So yeah, of course. Just give me 1 second. I will again share the screen. No, not this manner. Instead, there are such results, and let me just go back to the appropriate slide. Yeah, so for instance, there are some very interesting results. So for instance, this, okay, I can't share my pointer for some reason. So on the left-hand column, do you see this paper by Bernstein and Stein in SODA 16?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so that gives 1.5 approximation in root n update time.
Okay.
And actually, there is another paper which appears just in this SODA, which has this interesting result that it has a parameter that you can fine tune. And depending on that parameter, you will get some approximation ratio that is between 1.5 and 1, and an update time that is between root n and polylog n. And it sort of gives a smooth transition as we go from 1.5 approximation to 2 approximation. And the update time just goes from root n to polylog n. Yeah.
Hi, so for the, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick question, Aditya, then I'll stop. So, like in all of these algorithms, it was amortized in the sense that you did nothing for a long period of time and suddenly there's a burst of. So, are there like some sort of doubling? So, I guess, yeah, in the like a genuine spirit of amortization, can you like break the computation up so that at no point you have to.
Right, good question. Very good question. So actually we can, and actually there are two types of amortization. One is this local update rule. Let me go here, which is not following that framework that you just wait for a long period of time, do nothing. You are just following a greedy heuristic. This, I don't know how, there is a way to even make this thing worst case, but using much extra work. On the other hand, this lazy update thing where you are not doing anything for quite some time and then you do a bunch of activities, this can be made into worst case with some technical work. And indeed, so throughout this talk, I was not distinguishing between amortized versus worst case. But indeed, in this follow-up paper, one of our secondary results is how to make the previous algorithm from this paper in theorem 3 worst case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, so I would say that some of these algorithms can indeed be made into worst case. But if I am just trying to look at the big pictures regarding the very big open questions in this area, I would not put this amortized versus worst case distinction in there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just curious to. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Aditya, for waiting.
Yeah, so regarding the maximal matching problem, so nothing little of n is known as far as the update time is concerned.
As far as deterministic algorithms is concerned, if you care about randomized algorithms, even constant update time is known.
Okay, and what are the kinds of lower bounds which are known currently for these three problems?
Nothing. No lower bounds are known. Oh, sorry. I should correct myself. There is a lower bound known. And the lower bound is based on ACTH, which says that you cannot have a dynamic matching algorithms that has the following property. Fix some large constant K, and you wish to ensure that the matching you are maintaining does not admit any augmenting path of length larger than K. So if you could do that, then of course you would get 1 plus 1 over K approximation. right? So if you could do that in poly 1 over k time, then we are done. We have solved problem 3. But the lower bound says that type of algorithm is not going to be around. I mean, if you believe strong ETH.
All right, thanks.
So let me stop the recording and then we can have informal discussions.
Yeah, sure.